we finally made it. We're going to be taking a look at the server side scripting of our application, and it's going to be the more challenging part because it's most a lot of Java code. So if you don't have experience with Java, try to at least understand what I'm trying to explain because it's going to be a little bit challenging, but it's certainly going to be something well worth your time. So let's start talking a little bit about CRUD operations. Right off the bat, Studio will perform these operations with the basic widgets we've seen in the past. So we can create records, read records, update records from the database, and delete records. And that's pretty much all that happens. But what if we needed more? Now think about what are the things that happen behind the scenes when you actually make a purchase. So I want to make a distinction between CRUD operations, which are just these plain operations, and a transaction. So a transaction will be initiated by the server side whenever we receive the information from the client. So the first things that we have to do is the client's browser will have to select the client, and this client will be stored in that select widget we created. Then we'll select the products and their quantities, and they're going to be stored in that var receipt list item that we created on the previous module. And all this information will be stored in variables or widgets. We already talked about that. And there has to be some type of mechanism to send all this information. In Studio's case, it's going to be using JSON to invoke a service call or using a service variable to send this information to a Java function or a Java method that is wired up within a Java service. So on the server side, we will, once we receive all the information from the client, we're going to initiate a transaction. So what does a transaction mean? When we start a transaction, all of the steps or all of the operations within the transaction have to be successfully completed. If one of those operations fails, the operation has to roll back or has to nullify everything it's done, has to undo all the changes. So take a look at here. We have to start off, we have to create a new receipt, and then we have to link the client and the receipt in the database because we have to insert receipt and we have to insert, well, the client's already in the database. We have to insert the receipt and specify that the foreign key of the receipt is going to be the client. So once that's saved, we will be having the ID of the receipt. So if it's the first receipt, it's going to be receipt 1 linked to client 2, and it was saved at the current time in the database. And our total at this point will be set to 0. Otherwise, it's not gonna the database, the way it's wired, it's not gonna let nulls being saved. So we'll set it to 0. Once we create the receipt, we have to be filling the product lines on the list receipt product many to many table, and we have to be specifying the product and get the product price from the database. Remember that on the previous module, we were ignoring the price that was coming from the client because the client using a console can craft those values, but all we get is the product ID, and we will query the database to get the product ID from the database, not from the client side. So it's more trustworthy to do this. And the quantity is a value that the client is going to give us. If they change it, well, they have the interface to do that. So step 2 is going to be go through all the product lines, fetch the product price, and link that to the quantity to create that. Maybe I can show you exactly what item we're talking about. It's this one right here. So first we create the receipt, then we have to be cycling through all the products and all the quantities, but at the same time when we are getting the product, the server side has to get the price. The server side has not is not supposed to be trusting the price it's receiving from the client, because I'm not tiring of repeating. It can be manipulated by the client's console, as we've seen before. So once we get those, we have to calculate the total by multiplying the quantity and the price from the product line. So basically, once we have the list of products and the quantities, we have to, while this is being processed, we have to be adding up the quantity and the price to later add it up and update this receipt record in here with the total cost, because as soon as we saved it, it was set to 0. So once this is finished, it has to add up and give us the real value. And yeah, that will be update the receipt with the total cost. And once this is done, writing all these changes in the database, as you can see, we are writing in 1 and 2 tables, and we're querying this product one every time we're adding a product in there. And the final step would be to print a receipt. But in order to print a receipt, we have to go into Jasper reports, and that will be for a later module. So we're gonna assume that the receipt is gonna happen. We're just gonna put a little comment to print out the receipt, and then the transaction will end. So just think that step 1, 2, 3, 4 is done successfully, but if we cannot print the receipts, all of this has to be undone. So this is done when you typically put transaction begin, you do all your operations, and if it fails to get into here, it'll raise an exception and it'll do a service rollback. But if everything runs properly, it'll do a service commit, and then all these changes will be done. So just have in your mind that transactions are a set of operations. Is if one operation fails, it will roll back its changes to leave it as if nothing happened. So it's a really handy tool to know about. So let's go over to talk a little bit about what an IDE is. So an IDE is an integrated development environment. The one I personally use for Java is NetBeans, but you guys can use IntelliJ or Eclipse. I use NetBeans just because I've always used it. I have it installed in my computer, and I will show you how to set up NetBeans so it connects to your Studio application. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So I have NetBeans here. I'm going to create a new project, and this project is going to be a Java project with existing sources, because all the sources are created by Studio. And we are going to go to our path here. I'm just going to add the name of my application. My application is called App Sales. And now I have to specify the source package folders. Right now we only have, well, we don't have any right now, because we don't really have to touch the database service, because Studio manages automatically. So we're back in Studio, and we're going to create our first Java service. So in order to do that, we'll click here on Services, and we'll go to Java Service. So we have two options here. The service name will be the name that it'll put into the XML for Spring, and it's just a name that we'll use for referencing it here within Studio. So I'll call this receipt CF, and this CF is my way of naming things. You can pretty much put any name you would like. CF for me stands, it's a client-facing class. It's not required. Now the package and the class name is really important, because these are things that are used by Java. The package, you can think about it like a folder where you store your source code. An example of that would be a package for storing all the source code that's going to be processing clients, and a separate package or folder that's going to be processing reporting, or another package that's going to be processing the receipts, which this is the one I want to be creating in this place. So I'll put a package, and in order to avoid conflicts with these names and these folders, Java uses a reverse domain. So imagine that my application is going to be uh, stored in this website like appsales.com, and I really don't own that domain, but if I own that domain, I know that by writing it here in reverse notation, anybody else in the world won't be doing Java code or Java libraries, and we will be in conflict. So it's just a very good and thoughtful way to avoid conflicts with packages just by using reverse notation. But essentially, these are just folders. Um, and we're gonna put this in the receipts package, and I like to separate my yeah, we'll just call it receipts. I won't go into this right now. Okay, the last one I'm putting here is a capital letter. It starts with a capital letter because this is going to be the name of my class. So everything that's previously written here is on lowercase, and my class name is this last object here, and it has to be written with a capital R with a capital letter. If anybody that knows a little bit of object oriented, you know very well that this is widely accepted practice. So I'll just press OK. And if we go to our services folder, we now have our database service, and we have the receipt service. So if we go on our source folder and we go com.appsales.receipt, here's our Java source code file. So we can write any Java code we need to in this file here, and it'll be executed on the server side. So pretty much anything you write here, it's not going to be exposed to the client. The client will not have access to view or modify or change this code in any way. And all the server logging and all that good stuff should be done here. All the security, all your business logic is safely stored in these Java classes files, because they get compiled. They're behind a firewall. They're hosted in a Tomcat server, and if a user has access to read this, it's that um, they hacked your server or they got the source code from somewhere. But this is not code that is going to be easy to manipulate. So it's secure, and it's the best place to do all your calculations and things. So personally, I would also like to mention this. Personally, I don't like to use this web IDEs or integrated development environments. This editor is actually an editor. I wouldn't consider this an IDE, but it's just a simple web-based text editor. We have so much more benefits by using an IDE, which is what I want to talk about right now. So I will just close this right now, and we will switch over to an IDE. So what is an IDE? An IDE is an integrated development environment. These are tools that Java or hardcore Java programmers use, and it makes their lives much more easier because it checks the code, it gives you warnings, it gives you tips on how to better write your code. So this is very, very useful. don't stick to using that web-based text editor for Java. It's not very good. But whenever you use NetBeans with Studio, it's really good. So let's go ahead and wire up our application with NetBeans. It's really simple. So if I have NetBeans open here. Yep. So we're gonna go and click New Project, Java project with existing sources. We're gonna call this app sales, and this is the correct path to my Studio application. We'll click next. Now NetBeans wants to know where my source code is, and the only place where I have source code that I'm going to manipulate is in this path right here, in this src folder. So let's switch back to NetBeans. We'll add folder. This is the root of my project. We'll go to services, receipt CF, and source. So this is what I'm going to open. We'll click next. We'll include everything. It found this Java file and the Spring wiring so that it's exposed as a service. Let's finish that. So now I have my com.appsales.receipt and my Java classes is here. Great. Now it's giving me a lot of errors because it doesn't know what com.wavemaker.runtime and what this is, because it doesn't know about the built-in libraries Studio is using. So we also have to link them in here. And that is easily achieved by doing it right here. So we can right click, we're going to add a jar folder, and we have to navigate to our application here, and web app roots, web inf, lib, or live, I don't really know how that's pronounced, live library, I guess. And we have to select all of these jar files. These are all the jar files that are built in and bundled with Studio. These are the things that, here's the Hibernate libraries that let us do what I've previously explained. Java annotations, here's Spring, the tools that let us connect to the databases and all that stuff. You don't really have to worry much about this. This is already bundled in Studio. All you need to do is just point them here as libraries. So once they're imported, the IDE is starting to look at these packages or these folders that are built into these libraries, and then, oh, I found this package, and this is the class it's talking about. And I want to remove these comments just to clean up my code a little bit. So now we have our Java class. It extends this Java super service class. This is our constructor, and all it's doing is just calling the constructor of the super class. And we have a sample method. And all this sample method, all it does is logs out starting sample operation, hello world, returning result, which is just going to be hello world. And if there's an exception, it's going to say there's an error, and then it's going to return the value of string. So I'm not going to touch this code. All I did was just remove the comments. I'm going to save it, and I'm going to call it using a button. This button right here. btn insert ins, btn insert receipts. Insert receipt. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so when I click insert receipt, I want to execute this sample Java operation. So we'll go to events, on click, and we're going to do a new service, or better yet, I'll just insert it from here. Service variable. So we can see that our services, we now have two live variables, one static variable, and now we have a new type of variable, which is the service variable. And these are the guys that let us talk to Java. So it'll be srv ins receipt, or ins sale, or any name you want to call it. Now the service is going to be receipt cf, and the operation, the only method it finds in there in our receipt service is this Java sample operation. So we created it, and now we have to put the event to call it. So on click, service variables, srv insert receipt. So let's go ahead and run this. Okay, let's reload our page. Let's navigate to our new sale. Okay, these are the two push requests of list products and clients. Let's clear this. Now we're going to click on insert receipt. So you can see that it made a post operation. It went to this address, and the post was to call this method in this class, or in this service. There are no parameters, and the response was result hello world, because it just returns a string, and that string is stored as a data value inside our service variable. So if we go inspect the DOM, main.pagecontainer.page.srv insert receipt, get data value, or get data, where we should be able to see this object in there. So it says data value hello world, because that is what this resulted. It returned a string, and the string was hello world. This goes back to the client side, and this is the value that this returns. Now this mechanism can be used to return many things. If you can return binary data, if you encode it in base64, like pictures and all those things, or a JSON object that will feed a custom grid. So this is very, very, very powerful and flexible, because there really isn't much limit on what you can do here. It's Java, and you can import any Java library as long as it supports your current version, your version of the JDK. So here's where the power really shows up, because you guys have no idea how much freedom and power we have on running these code, because it's all the power of Java in a golden plate, I'd say. So let's carry on with our insert operation. So with what I have previously discussed, with all the transactions and things that are going on here, we'll have to create a new method for that. So I'm going to get rid of our sample Java operation, and I'm going to create a new one. So it's going to be a public. It's going to return a string. It's just going to say a little message if it worked or not, and what's the ID of the receipt. And the method is going to be called ins receipt, and it's going to receive two parameters. It's going to receive a client object, and it's going to receive a list of list product receipt, and I'm just going to be calling it list product receipt. And we're going to put our braces in here, and we're going to put return null for now. So I am getting a couple of errors here. As far as this IDE, it doesn't know what a client type is, and what a list item is, and what a list product receipt is. So if you guys remember when I was explaining about the Hibernate, it's looking for those Java classes. So let me show you where what I'm talking about. So we created our receipts client-facing class, and we have the SalesDB service. So inside the source, com, SalesDB, data, here's the client Java object. So I want to receive an object of this type that contains integer string for name, last name, date, and gender. And that is what I want to receive here. And it's going to be an object of this type, and it's going to be called client internally in this function. The list item is built into Java, so we'll just have to do a really easy import. And the list product receipt, I'm talking about this item here, list receipt. It's actually called list receipt product, so allow me to fix that right now. List receipt product. So I'm still getting an error because I have to fix the import. So I'll just do a right click, fix imports. So the list object is built into Java, so it doesn't have any problem with this. The list receipt product, it doesn't know what it is, and the client, it found another class called client, and it's not the package that I need. It's in com.son.security.ntlm. I think this is Microsoft Security, and this is not what we need. So I'll cancel that here. I have to point in my libraries so the IDE knows what these items are. So we'll go to libraries. We're going to add a jar. Now, I'm using a jar because these are compiled, but in the case of these SalesDB, it's not packaged in a jar or a Java archive file. A Java archive file is like a zip file where you store all your source code. So we don't have to import a jar. We just have to point into the source folder in here. So Studio knows the IDE knows about it. So we'll go up a level. We'll go into services. We're going to SalesDB source. So you can see that the relative path is just services SalesDB source. And once I import that, and I click OK, now it knows about the com.salesdb.data, and now here are the classes that I need to show, which is client and the list receipt product. So now that I go right click fix imports, it finds the ones I want. So com.salesdb data list receipt product, yep, that's the type I need. The list item is good, and the client is the client I need. I don't need the other one. So it gives me a choice which item I need, and this is the one I want. So once I click OK, let's collapse all this. I now can accept these parameters here. So now here's where the good part starts, because I'm going to have to be writing all this Java code here. So I'll go step by step. It'll take a little while, but try to hold on for a minute. Okay, so first off, we have to get the service that will initiate and commit or roll back the Hibernate transactions, and all that is wired up into the Hibernate service. So our Hibernate service is the one in the database, and it's this class right here, the salesdb.class. So if we take a look at it, we can get commit, begin transactions, roll up transactions. So we have to get an instance of this object right here, and in order to instance it, we have to get the service that the user creates when he opens a session or initiates the connection with the application. So think about this. Imagine we had security enabled in our application. We have to get the instance that the user is using of his session. We're not going to be creating an empty instance of this database instance, because we were going to have many users, and many users are going to have different IDs. So we have to get their instance, because their instance are going to independently be generating transactions. And when we have many users trying to do many transactions at the same time, we have to somehow be able to differentiate what user or what session is doing what. So I know it's a really hard thing to explain. So just remember that whenever we have to initiate a transaction, we have to get the session from the service that is wired up in Spring. So I know it's going to be a little hard to explain, but if you need a little bit more explanation, well, just send me an email. So just think about writing this. Let's see. Sales DB. We're going to call this service equals, and this is a cast sales DB. And we're going to get the runtime access. Runtime access dot get the instance of the current user, and we're going to get the service bean, and bean is called sales DB. Okay, so let's fix the imports. All right, so this is the service that does all the negotiation and transactions with Hibernate. This is the current runtime access and the instance of me, the user, my current instance of the user. So it will identify this user is going to be doing this transaction, and it's going to be using this exposed service or bean. Bean is just another name for a Java object class, but this is the name of the service that is wired inside the Spring. So once we get the service, we can now get in here and initiate the transaction. So I'll just comment in here, initiate transaction. And all we have to do is put service.begin. So this is what the transaction start looks like. So we also have to have a session. The session is when you open a session, you are able to talk to the database through Hibernate, or it's a way to execute queries or get information from the database. So once we initiate our transaction, we can get a session. So I'm gonna write in here, a session allows you to talk to the database. So we're gonna do a session is equal to service dot get data service manager dot get session. Okay, so it also needs an import right here. That's going to be a Hibernate session. Perfect. So every time we open a session, we have to close it when we're done with it, because imagine every user opening a connection to a database and not closing it. So that would cause problems with your server. Your application server will be opening way too many connections and its memory would be leaking. So just remember, every time you begin something, you have to end it, and every time you open a session, you have to close it. Otherwise, you're going to have a bad time with the server. So we're going to surround this with a try and catch block. Try and catch is very simple and straightforward. I'm going to try to execute some code here. If there's an error running this code, I'm going to catch the error here and handle it. So I'm going to just do a overly simplified exception. It's not the best practice, but for this simple example, we're going to just use a generic exception. And if I reach this line of code, which is the last one, I'm gonna commit my changes. Service.commit. And if there is an error, I'm gonna run this line of code here, and the thing we have to put in here is going to be service.rollback. I'm gonna format this to show it a little bit easier, a little bit better. So here is where all my instructions are going to be run. If I get to this final line, they're all going to be committed. But if one of these commits, raises an exception, it's going to jump over here, it's going to be caught, and it's going to roll back the transaction. And it's a good practice to throw the error up or create a new one, unless I typically do this, that I throw the error over to Studio, so Studio sees the exception, throw new exception, and I'm just gonna say error inserting receipt. Okay, what's the error here? Okay, yeah, I also have to add the clause and say that this function here throws this exception. So you can see how helpful the IDE is by telling me, hey, you forgot to add this. So I'll just click on this little bulb, and it's going to add this little clause here to tell the compiler that this may or may not throw an exception. It has to be handled or thrown off the stack. So now that we have a nice try and catch block, try this code. If it works, we'll commit it. If it doesn't, it'll roll back and throw out a new exception. And what I might do is I might do this, e.print stack trace. The stack trace will reveal what object or code in here threw the exception. If I don't put a stack trace, I won't really see it. So it's telling me that it's not like a good practice to throw that, because it just shows how your programs are structured. But in this example, I'll use this in case we have an example and an error. Now, regardless whether this code works or it doesn't, we have to finish to close the session. Otherwise, the object is going to be open. So we use this using finally. So the finally will run if the try was successful or not. So either case, we have to close it. So we're gonna just go session dot close. But before closing it, we might want to check if it's null, so we don't get a null pointer exception. So we're just gonna check if it's not null, then close it. Otherwise, we're gonna be telling null to close, and that's gonna be an exception. That's what it's typically called as a null pointer. So, and return null. I don't want to return null. I would like to return. We're just gonna do a value here so it's properly structured. Okay, I like the way it's structured now. So we'll continue writing here. First off, we're gonna do a big decimal item here. A big decimal. It's gonna be the total value. Big decimal total equals new. Big decimal. Oh, I'm just gonna set it to null right now. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. We're just gonna create the oh no, it has to be 0. Forget about that. Big decimal dot 0. Yeah, this part here I'm talking about this one, that our total in this step will be set to 0 temporarily. So I'll need to use this big decimal item because our money value, which is this total cost, it's a decimal. So Hibernate, this version of Hibernate, when it sees a decimal, it'll automatically store it as a big decimal. So we'll create a big decimal total. And then we're going to create a new receipt. Okay, so we're going to do receipt. We're going to call it receipt equals new receipt. We also have to add the import here. So you can see it's now finding that plain old Java object from the receipt. That's in our Hibernate mapping. So we're creating a new blank receipt. Now on the receipt, we're gonna set the client, and the client is the one that we're gonna be sending over as a parameter. We're also going to receipt.set the total cost, and this is going to be temporarily 0. And we're going to receipt.set transaction date, and the transaction date is just going to be a new date. Every time we run this new date, it's going to give me the current time, the current timestamp right now. So it will ask me for an import. Yes, that's the right one. Okay, so we built in our receipt object. We create a new receipt object. We set the client, the total cost, the transaction date. Let's take a look in here. The client, total cost, transaction date, and now we can insert it. So we do that using service.insert receipt. Great. So as you can see, I'm not required to write insert into receipt values and set these values in here. I'm just getting the objects, and Hibernate is automatically doing all the SQL behind the scenes. So I really like this because I can just focus on doing Java code, and here is the real magic and benefit of using object relational mapping. This is so nice and elegant to do this. So we now did step 1. Now we're gonna go through all of the product lines, and we're gonna be fetching the price from the product database, and then we're gonna be setting the quantity into these product lines. So let's go over to Java, and now we're going to use a simple for loop. For this item, it's going to be, our type is list receipt product, and the name for this internally is just gonna be called list receipt product, list receipt, and then it's gonna use colon, and now this is what we're gonna cycle through. So this is gonna create a new type. It's not gonna create a new type, but it's gonna create the type of list receipt product, and the current one in the index is gonna be called this one, and the list object is going to be called, I'm gonna rename this a little bit, receipt product. I'm gonna add a little s here to show that this is the list item and this is the single item in that list, and the single item of this list is of this type. So I hope it's not that confusing. And we're gonna open and close braces, and I'm gonna be cycling through these things here. Let's do a little format so it looks neat. So now we have the list of receipt product here. So we're gonna get the product from the database. We're gonna do a select statement where product equals product ID equals to the ID of this current product that we're gonna be cycling through this list object here. And it's very simple. This is the way we can do a very simple select query if we have the primary key. We're just gonna go and say product equals product. Product of type product is equal to session dot get product dot class and we're gonna get this list receipt product dot get product dot get ID product. Okay, now I have to import the product, and it is change type of product to object. Okay, it just wants to cast it. Okay, now it's happy. And it's kind of long and a little bit complicated, but give it a shot trying to understand what this is. I'm going to create a type an item type of product, and it's going to be called product. Now product, if I control click, it's going to go and take me into the product.java. This is this same item here, and it'll have an integer, a string, a big decimal. And what I care about is this integer here, this ID product, because inside the Hibernate mapping, it knows that this is the primary key. So this is going to get the session from the database session is going to go and say, okay, I want to look for the mapping that belongs to this class, which is this table here, and it knows the primary key is ID product, and I put comma, and all this is going to give me the ID of this current list receipt product. So list receipt product has a product, and inside the product it has its ID product. So whatever this returns, it has to be compatible to whatever I said on the left. So if I remove this, it's giving me an error because it's saying this is just going to return me a generic object. It doesn't know if it's going to be a product, or if it's going to be a receipt, or if it's going to be a client. So I enforce that whatever it returns here is fit into the description of the product, and then it's assigned into the product. So this is commonly known as casting. So it's a little verbose, it's a little long, but this is much better than having to write a select statement and concatenating sending a parameter. I think it's a very elegant way to do it. So send me your comments if you think that my explanation of this is a little bit complicated. So once we get the product, we can now set the receipt into this item. So this is the current item. We're going to set the receipt. So the receipt has already been created, and when I create the receipt, I already have the ID of the receipt that it's saved in here, because when I do save receipt, it's going to get number 8, 9, 10, because this is set to auto increment right here. So Hibernate is smart enough to know about this. So after I insert the receipt, it returns the ID of the receipt, so I have it in here, so I can now save it here as a foreign key in order to create all the list items that I have here. So once I get the receipt, I can now do a total equals total.add product.get price dot multiply big decimal dot value of it's gonna be list receipt product dot get quantity. Okay, now here's another really long and complicated line. There is something in Java that is called immutability. So whenever I create a big decimal item, I really can't go in there and delete the value and overwrite it. It's something that this version of Java 1.7 quite can't manage. So it's creating a new big decimal, and it's not as simple as to put 1 plus 1 or 1.2 plus 2.1. You have to use these methods to do it. So what I'm going to do is total. I'm going to add the price, and I'm going to multiply it by the quantity I am receiving from this item. But yeah, when I have to multiply, I have to multiply two big decimal values, and I have to convert the quantity into this big decimal values. It's a little cumbersome, and that's how I figured out how big decimal works. So I know this is not the best thing. It would be really easier just to do total plus equals total times product times price, but it just quite doesn't work that way with big decimal. So if you have a recommendation over this, I would really like to hear it, but this is what's going to work for it now. Okay, we're getting through a lot here. So we're also going to set the price. This price is the one here, because the products change prices. Last month, gasoline was around $2, but this month is probably around $2.10 or something like that. So the price changes of the product, but the price that we sold it to in this date doesn't. So that's why I'm saving the price in here. So let's go ahead and just store the value here. So this is going to be list receipt product dot set price, and we're going to get the price from the product item we just got in here. Get price. Yes. So now we have built in our little entity here. We set the receipt right here. We set the product. Oh wait, we haven't set the product. Just let me check real quick my notes. Yeah, we have to set the oh, it already has it. The product is one of the values, and the product and the quantity are values that are already coming in from the JSON object, so we don't have to worry about the product and the quantity. We just have to worry about the receipt and the price. And that's what we're doing here, the receipt and the price. Great. Okay, so that's good. That's gonna work. So once we do that, we're gonna save the list item. So we're gonna do service dot insert list receipt product. Perfect. So I think this would cover step number 2. Well, actually also step number 3, because we're also calculating the product lines, all the total with this total value in here. So let's go back to NetBeans here. And we're going to update the receipt. So the receipt, the total in this moment, it was set to 0. Now it's going to be set receipt dot set total cost to the total value, but the total value now has the real total cost of the receipt. And now we're going to use session dot update, and we're going to update the receipt. So this is going to, on the fly, create the SQL statement of update receipt set total cost to the value of total here. So this is so much nicer than having to write all that SQL in there. So once we updated the receipt, we now have to print it, but we can't print it because we don't have a Jasper report. Receipt, I misspelled it here. Okay, so I'm just gonna put a little comment here. Print Jasper report, and we're not gonna be able to do that in this example, but I'll promise we'll go through this later. All right. So if we get to this point, we're assume the Jasper report is printed. We're gonna commit this. So if there is an error in any of these lines, imagine that we're unable to update our receipt. This will raise an exception, and then it's gonna undo everything. So it's gonna remove the receipt. It's gonna remove all the items that were in there. So it's a very powerful tool to be able to do this type of thing, because most applications just don't do one operation. It does a set of operations. If one operation is done for fails for some reason, it's really good to be able to roll it back. So I think our Java class and our Java method is done. So how about we make a test? So I'll save it. So when I save it, here's a little thing about this. Remember that I had a sample Java operation. So that's the service that is wired up in Spring right now. And right now we have a method called insert receipts. Okay, insert receipt. So we have to do a little trick in order to have Studio rewire it. Well, so I'll show you what I'm talking about. Insert receipt right now is saying the sample Java operation. I changed that. I changed what this is typically known as a method signature. If I change the method signature, uh, that means that the service changes, so I have to rewire it, or make Studio rewire the service in here. So we have to go to the Java services and re-import it. Now, here's a little bug that it would be really good um, to patch in the newer versions of Studio. Whenever we do this, whenever we touch these services here, our our grid boxes or our grids over here might change. So it's a little bit of a problem. Before doing this wiring, all I do is just go to the main, where I know that there are no grids, because it messes them up. You can see that the sample Java operation is still here, but if I click on this blue icon here, it's gonna reload it, and then I save it. It's now happy, and it now knows about this. So all I did is just refresh, save. If you save, you might overwrite what we wrote in NetBeans, so just be careful. Always do this refresh. So on another a little quick overview. Whenever you're going to touch anything here in the services, make sure you don't have any grids, because the grids change, because their data sources are here. So when these things, the grids might lose their columns. So just go to like a page, like your login page or your main page, so that you don't lose your grids, because it takes a lot of time to put the columns and everything. So just click on the service, click on the blue icon, and then click save. And all the wiring, it's going to be, now this is going to be my service, this is going to be my method in the service, or my function. So let's go back to the sales new. Let's click on the service insert receipt. Now we can see that the service operation sample operation is gone, but we now click on insert receipt. So this insert receipt is now going to be receiving two parameters, a client object and a list object of list receipt product. And we can bind those things here in the data tab. So the client, we get them out from here. So you can see it's happy, it has a little checkbox, we can bind that. And the list receipt product is going to be our variable list receipt product. Even though it's saying a red tick mark here, it's fine. This will work. So just trust me on this. And oh, I forgot to put the return value. So here's another tip. I'm not changing the method signature, so I'm not changing the way the service wiring is going to look, because all it cares about is what return type, what's the name, and what parameters it has. If I change any code in here, I don't have to do this cumbersome thing of clicking here and re-importing and saving it. All I'm going to do right now is just change the return, and it's just going to say success processing sale number. I'm just going to put the ID of the primary key of the receipt.get ID receipt. I'm going to save it. I don't have to do any business here. It's going to work fine. So now we can test it out and see if I didn't commit any mistakes. Okay, let's go here. Let's reload our page. Let's clear this. Let's make a new sale. So it loaded my list of products and a list of clients. Let's go and select John Doe. Let's sell 5 donuts to John Doe. And let's I did 5. I didn't click properly on the donuts. So 5 donuts and 5 hamburgers. And we're gonna add 2 ice creams. Okay, so 5 hamburgers, 5 donuts, and 2 ice creams. Now I'll be getting this information, this list item here, this list variable, and the client that is selected, and I'm gonna do the post and run the Java code I coded in here. So let's click this. So the post is going to call the method ins_receipt, and it's sending the parameters. I'm sending the object of the employee. You can see all the information of John M. Doe is in here. And I'm also sending another parameter that is a list object with all 3 products and their quantity. So all I'm seeing here is product and quantity, product and quantity, product and quantity. And it's going to be 5 hamburgers, 5 donuts, and 2 ice cream. So all this is being fed here. This is going to be the client information that I sent, and these are the list items that you can see here. So in this case, we sent 3 products and the quantity of 5, 5, and 2. So all the code came in here. It created the receipt. It cycled through all of them. It later calculated the total, and then it updated it. It didn't print it, and then it committed, and it returns success processing sale number and the number of the receipt. And we can see that here in the response. So this was indeed sale number 8. So if you go to our database and I refresh it, here's number 8. Our total cost was of 58.75, and it was done pretty much a minute ago. And I look into the receipt products, and if I filter by receipt number 8, I should be seeing those 3 items with 5, 5, and 2 quantity. So this was the hamburger, this was the donut, and I believe this was the ice cream, and it's the unitary price. So if I went over to the product and I changed the price, I won't be changing the price at which I sold the item here, because they're 2 independent values. So it's another little tip on that. Now, what if we have an error? I'm gonna purposely create an error after we update the receipt. We're not gonna commit it. I'm gonna just throw new exception made up error. Wow, this is not an error. There's a difference between an exception and an error. The proper word is this, and it's not gonna find the commit. We're just gonna comment it out. So this code is done so that it always fails. And when it fails, it will roll back, and then it's gonna close the session. So it was complaining that that this code is going to be unreachable because it's going to find this. So that's another nifty thing of using an IDE. Let's format it. Okay, that's fine. I didn't change my method signature. Oh, I also would like to throw some things into the console. So we're going to be showing the totals of how they increment here. So we're going to go and say system.out.println. And I'm going to I'm not using the logger, so if you guys are asking me for that, don't worry about it. Total up till now is going to be total dot, it's just going to be total. Yeah, so the first round it's going to get the first value, then second round it's going to get the incremental of that until it finishes. So let's save this. We have to remember to save, otherwise it's not going to be included in our in our in our project, and all we got to do is just run it. It's that easy because we didn't change this. So let's just run it. Okay, let's make a new sale. Let's go to Jane Dunn. Jane Dunn. Okay, let's select the products. We're gonna select the bagel. We're gonna put 14 bagels and one sandwich. All right, great. Now we're gonna process the insert receipts, and now it's giving an error. It raised the exception. The exception is error inserting receipt. Now we're not seeing the message made up error, made up exception. We're seeing this one because this one raised the exception, and the exception was caught, and this was thrown here back to the service. So what we're seeing is this. If we need to see in what line or what happened in here, we have to check the stack trace. So to check the stack trace, we need to check the server log. And in order to check the server log, we go to source, server logs, and here's the stack trace. So here's where I was printing out the prices of the items. So the first item, I don't remember what it was that we added. It was 70, and then it was adding up the next one. I think it was the ice cream, and then it went to 73.58, and then it reached up this line of code, line receipt CF, line 48, which threw this exception, and you can see it right here. Then this exception was later caught by the try and catch block in line 56, which is line 56, and this was what was thrown back to the browser here as a service response. So the response was error, exception, throwing that, and we're seeing that we're seeing an error here, but this is not going to be all that helpful because as far as the browser see it, the server just said there's an error. You would have to go into your Tomcat server and look for the Catalina out. But here in Studio, the Catalina out is this server logs right here. So your client won't be able to, I mean, by client I mean the server browser or your user server browser won't be able to see this because this is internal of your server side code. So whenever there's client side errors, you can check them up in the Firebug, on the Firebug console. When there are server side errors, you gotta go and check the Catalina out of the Tomcat. So here's a little bit about exceptions and Java classes and all that. I'm gonna comment this out. I'm going to close my commit and then leave my class as it is. Wow, we really covered a lot in here, and I'm guessing that here's where I'm gonna get most of the comments from people because they're gonna be so confused. I think I crammed so much information in one whole module, but this is a video, so you can watch it as many times as you want. And remember, I'm always open for questions and to give you support. And I hope it's of great use because here, having this here really makes Studio worthwhile because I am not limited with anything. I've used this to set up biometric machines and connect to them and get data from them. I can connect to webcams. I can connect to any other SQL server or services. We'll be doing a Jasper report further down this module. Really, the possibilities are endless. I also have an example of FTP servers and parsing XMLs, and well, there's pretty much. I'm just telling you the idea that there really isn't much what you can't do. This is utter freedom. So try to study this code. Once I'm done, I'm going to be sharing the project export. But this having being able to do this is really great, and this is one of the things I've that has really made me stick around Studio a lot, because this is great. So send me your comments. I know it was a lot of information. It's really early in the morning. So please give me your comments and everything. So have a good day.